Good afternoon.
Okay, fine.
I hope everybody is able to hear me properly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
okay.
Yes, sir.
So, I will just highlight what is the spectrum of gastroenterology. As my previous speaker was saying about various specialties, I think gastroenterology is one of the neglected branches, and it has got certain subspecialties like luminal gastroenterology, hepatology and liver transplant, pancreatology, various diagnostic and therapeutic endoscopies, which involves gastroscopy, colonoscopy, and ERCPs. I think most of us will be aware about what is a gastroscopy, what is a colonoscopy, and what does an ERCP do. I have just highlighted few images where I have shown. This is the first image is showing an ulcer in the duodenal bulb, which is H. pylori related. The second image, which is showing a narrow band image where the bluish colored area is of the esophagus. This is the squamo-columnar junction, and this is the columnar lined epithelium of the stomach. And these two linear ulcers are because of gastroesophageal reflux disease. The third image shows a benign esophageal stricture which is caused by corrosive poisoning. The fourth image is showing large esophageal varices which can be seen in patients of portal hypertension, which may be because of cirrhosis, which is the leading cause of portal hypertension. And we can see red wale marks over these. So these varices are at high risk of bleeding. The fifth image is showing bleeding fundal varix in a patient with cirrhosis and portal hypertension, which is a nightmare for the endoscopist. We have to inject glue to stop the bleeding. And the sixth image is showing a button battery in a small kid which was swallowed accidentally while playing. And the button battery has caused corrosive injury because of chemical reactions in the esophagus, and it has caused burns in the esophageal mucosa extending till the submucosa and the muscle layer. So these are routine things which any endoscopist or a gastroenterologist attends to by endoscopy or colonoscopy and ERCP. I would like to highlight two new modalities with the help of few case presentations which I have treated in the past decade or so. So this is the first kid, a 5-year-old kid, came with history of ingestion of a metallic screw a day prior. He was playing in the school and accidentally he swallowed a screw. He didn't tell his parents. The next day he started having pain, abdomen and vomiting in the school, and then the teacher came to know that he has swallowed a screw. He went to a gastroenterologist. An abdominal x-ray was done to confirm that the screw is there in the abdomen. Now, when anybody has swallowed a foreign body, if it is a metallic foreign body with pointed ends, sharp ends or sharp edges, or if it is a button battery, we need to remove it endoscopically because it can perforate the GI tract. So it was seen by my fellow colleague gastroenterologist outside the hospital. He attempted to remove it with the help of a gastroscope or a push enteroscope. But because the screw had migrated beyond the DJ flexure into the jejunum, he was not able to remove it. So he was referred to me for a enteroscopy. Now, what is enteroscopy? If you see this image, classically, with the help of the gastroscope, we are able to reach the stomach and the duodenum and the proximal jejunum 10-20 centimeters beyond the DJ flexure. If we do a colonoscopy, we are able to reach the entire length of colon from the anal canal, the sigmoid colon, descending colon, transverse colon, ascending colon, cecum, and we are able to see the distal 10, 20, 30 centimeters of the terminal ileum. But the middle small intestine for an endoscopist till 2 decades back was considered a no man's land. We cannot reach there. Of course, we had capsule endoscopy where we can make the patient swallow a capsule and see the small intestinal mucosa. But that was a purely diagnostic tool. We cannot do anything therapeutic in the small intestine. For the past 2 decades, we have got enteroscopes, which are long scopes, and we have assistance in the scopes through either the help of a balloon overtube or with the help of a mechanism which is known as a spiral device, whereby we can reach practically the entire length of small intestine endoscopically and do all forms of therapeutic maneuvers. So there are balloon assisted endoscopes. Initially, it was a double balloon enteroscope which was there, then single balloon enteroscope came, and device assisted enteroscopy with manual spirals and now motorized spirals. I have been having an experience of all these 4 modalities. I have used all these 4 scopes in my training in DNB in Gangaram Hospital, Delhi, and subsequently in Medanta. And I have been doing enteroscopies for more than a decade now at Zydus Hospital also. So just to show how it works, this is a single balloon enteroscope. It is a thin scope with a overtube which has a balloon at the tip of the endoscope. Once the endoscope is advanced in the small intestine up to a certain level, after that the overtube is pushed over it, and when the overtube reaches here, we inflate the balloon and withdraw the entire thing. So the small intestine is shortened and crumpled like a hosepipe. Subsequently, again we advance the endoscope further. We reach a point, deflate the balloon, push the overtube ahead, inflate the balloon again and again, pull it back. By this way, gradually at every time 20-30 centimeter of small intestine is advanced. And when we do it antegradely through the mouth, we are able to reach the jejunum and mid intestine. If we do it retrogradely with the help through the colon, we can reach the distal ileum, mid ileum and the proximal ileum. So it is possible to reach the entire length of small intestine with the help of this endoscope. Now, when the patient came to us, we first did a fluoroscopy and confirmed that the screw is there in the abdomen. He was having pain. So, and it is a metallic pointed foreign body. So there is a chance that it can get perforated and the patient will end up in a laparotomy. So we intubated the patient, gave general anesthesia, started the enteroscopy. These are fluoroscopic images to show how much the endoscope is getting looped inside the patient's peritoneum. So gradually we advanced the scope and we were able to reach the screw after 150 centimeters from the DJ flexure. We removed the screw, we got hold of it with a snare. Gradually we took it out inside the overtube. Now once the tube endoscope and the screw is in the overtube, there are no chances of damage to the small intestinal mucosa because of the pointed screw. And immediately we were able to take it out. The procedure took around 1.5 hours. It was done in the evening. Patient was kept fasting for 6 hours because of general anesthesia. Next day morning, he took his breakfast and by afternoon, he was home. So he was home in less than 24 hours of time with absolutely no complications. Another patient, 66-year male, hilar cholangiocarcinoma. I have shown a pictorial image of what was done by the surgeon. So the tumor was removed with a right hepatectomy and a biliary excision was done. A hepatojejunostomy and a jejunojejunostomy was done. This was done on 4th of April 2016. In the first hospital stay, he had anastomotic side bleed. The patient was re-explored and a redo jejunojejunostomy was made and ultimately discharged after 15 days of the second surgery. He was readmitted with sepsis after 10 days. He was having fungal infection. He was in shock. He was an elderly guy, diabetic, and he was on vasopressor support in the ICU. In the ICU, after admission, he started and he stopped worsen. So at that time, I was told in the ICU, I took my normal gastroscopy because patient was having melena. Initially, the first image is showing the esophagus, which was normal. This is the stomach, which was also normal. The second part of duodenum was fine. Then I used my enteroscope and advanced the enteroscope into the jejunum, and initially I was able to see some fresh blood in the jejunal lumen. As I advanced the scope further, I was able to reach the anastomotic site. There was active ulcer in the jejunostomy. So this patient had anastomotic site bleed 2 times. Now he was very sick. He cannot undergo a second surgery. He was already in shock. So with the help of APC, which is arcone plasma coagulation, which burns the mucosa only superficially, we cannot use aggressive cautery. This is a patient who has undergone recent surgery. He is sick. If we use aggressive cautery, there is chances that the third surgery will be required. So with the help of FPC, I was able to char the entire bleeding ulcer, which is seen in the 4th image, and the patient stabilized after 24 to 48 hours. A plan was made that if the ulcer doesn't heal, we would put a hemoclip over there. So plan was made to do a repeat endoscopy after 48 hours and check the ulcer. So after 48 hours, we did a check enteroscopy and we can see nicely that the ulcer is now healing. It is white base. There is no vessel in this area which requires hemoclip application. And the patient ultimately got discharged. Third case, 87-year female, severe aortic stenosis, coronary artery disease, post-PTCA, LV dysfunction, low ejection fraction, diabetes, and hypertension. Now, this lady was admitted in a good corporate hospital in Baroda, attended by a gastroenterologist, cardiologist, and a critical care specialist. She received 6 units of blood in 60 hours time. In spite of that, she was actively bleeding and her blood pressures were on lower side. The gastroenterologist did a gastroscopy, which was just showing mild enteral gastritis, but there was no active bleed. A colonoscopy was done, and it showed that the entire length of colon is filled with blood and altered blood and blood clots. No bleeding site was identified. In shock, the patient was referred to us from Baroda. On admission, when the patient came to us, she was unstable. We had to give her vasopressors. And immediately from the year after resuscitation, we did a CT angio. So most of these treatments, they require a multimodality approach. It is not just the gastroenterologist which can do everything. We need help. And this is the arterial phase image. If you can see in this image, in this area, see the contrast is getting extravasated in the small intestine. And this is around 50-60 centimeters away from the ileocecal junction. So in the venous phase, when we took the image, we can see that the contrast has filled the lumen of the small intestine. So there is active massive bleed. However, we cannot see any mucosal abnormality in this area. So there is no tumor. If there was a tumor, the patient might have required urgent surgery to remove the tumor. So we started doing a retrograde single balloon enteroscopy, and we were able to see multiple AV malformations in the ileum around 60-70 centimeters beyond the IC junction. We placed 4 to 5 hemoclips in that area. The patient stabilized, and the vasopressor requirement fell down. Her hemoglobin was remaining stable. After 24 hours, again she passed some blood in stool. So because we had kept her NBM, we had told that she might rebleed because we are not able to always see all the AV malformations. We again went ahead and did an enteroscopy. At that time, there was no blood in the lumen. This is the IC wall. This is the cecum, and we can see green stool. This is the clips which I had applied, and the effluent which was coming was bilious. There was no blood. However, the patient was very sick. She had multiple comorbidities, and she may not give us more time. So I called my fellow intervention radiologist, and I told him to do a check angiography and see what he is seeing. So the intervention angiography was done, DSA, and you can see these multiple clips which I had applied, and there is an abnormal blush of contrast in this area. So there are some AV malformations. There was no extravasation of contrast even on angiography, which means that the bleeding is not happening. But the blush was there. The intervention radiologist told me that your clips are fine, their patient is not bleeding, we don't need to do anything. However, she had comorbidities. Already we have injected contrast 2 times. If she develops renal failure, she is going to develop. I told him it is better to coil the feeder vessels from the internal side too. So he did coiling of the feeder vessel, and after the coiling, there was no blush. So it is a multimodality treatment. With the help of enteroscopy and angiography, we were able to stop this patient's bleeding. Post this angiography, she stayed in the ICU for 48 hours. We had kept her electively intubated, and then she was discharged home. Now, another case, 35-year female, recurrent colicky abdominal pain, weight loss, vomiting, and anemia. She was having these symptoms for around 2-3 years. She went to a gastroenterologist. A CT enterocrisis was done to see the small intestine. It was reported normal. No strictures were seen. No bowel thickening was seen. So the gastroenterologist placed the capsule endoscope, and it showed multiple ulcerated strictures in the small bowel. The capsule was retained in the small bowel because of the strictures. The lumen was small, and the capsule didn't pass into the stool. A diagnosis of small bowel Crohn's disease was made. She was treated with steroid and azoran. Her symptoms improved. She started gaining weight, but she was not passing the capsule. So classically, when the capsule is retained, and if the patient is not having symptoms of acute bowel obstruction, we can wait for 2 to 3 months for the capsule to pass. Because in Crohn's disease, the strictures are inflammatory and fibrosing. The inflammatory component of the strictures will resolve on treatment. The strictures which are because of fibrosis will not resolve. So we need to give the patient some time for the inflammation to settle. Once the inflammation settles, the capsule may pass spontaneously. But in her case, she was not lucky and the capsule was retained. We did a repeat CT and a review of the previous CT to find out exactly where the capsule is currently. And it was difficult for us because the radiologist told us that the capsule is lying exactly in the mid-small bowel. So whether I will reach from antegrade approach or retrograde approach, I didn't know. So I started doing an antegrade enteroscopy. In the first image, you can see that there is a tight stricture in the small bowel. And beyond that, I am able to see this yellowish colored capsule, which is now stained by bile because of being in the lumen for so long. So we reached the capsule with the help of the enteroscope. And we first dilated the stricture with a CRE balloon. After dilating the stricture, we placed a Rothnet to catch hold of the capsule. And gradually we will be able to bring it out of the stricture. And the capsule was ultimately retrieved. So this patient was saved from a big laparotomy. So what can enteroscopy do? It can help in control of bleeders. It can remove polyps the way we remove polyps in colon. It can remove foreign bodies. It can help in dilatation of strictures. And most importantly, in obtaining tissue for diagnosis of diseases in the small bowel. So if there is ulcerated area or bowel wall thickening, it can be because of tuberculosis, lymphoma, inflammatory bowel disease, eosinophilic enteritis. What the disease is, if we come to know, we can treat the patient medically. All patients will not require surgery. So we can reach the with the help of enteroscope, take tissues and diagnose the disease. Another modality which I'm going to highlight is endoscopic ultrasound. So a 70-year gentleman presented with loss of appetite and weight loss, progressive since 1 year, new onset diabetes, cholestatic jaundice for 2 months with pain abdomen. Now, if you see the history, this looks like adenocarcinoma head of pancreas. All mass in the head of pancreas are not CA pancreas. Of all masses, 25% actually turn out to be non-malignant. They may be lymphomas, tuberculosis, or other pathologies. So obtaining tissue for diagnosis is very important. Plus, this patient on imaging had lung nodules which look metastatic. So we need to palliate his jaundice so that he can be offered chemotherapy. So what does an endoscopic ultrasound do? These are scopes which have different probes, ultrasound probes attached at the tip of the endoscope. And we can see structures which are outside the lumen. So if somebody has got mediastinal lymph nodes and the cause of lymph nodes is not known, I can put the scope in the esophagus, I can see the lymph nodes and take samples from the lymph nodes very safely. It is an OPD procedure like doing a gastroscopy. These samples can be processed as normal biopsy, and we can even subject them to culture or immunohistochemistry if it is a lymphoma for typing the type of tumor. So this is one important use to obtain samples for diagnosis. And we can do many therapeutic work also with the help of EUS. So this patient, if I put the scope in the antrum or the duodenal bulb, I can see the head of pancreas, I can pass a needle, take samples from the mass. And pancreas is an organ which is not easily accessible, either ultrasound guided or CT guided, because it is below and behind the stomach and very much near to the spine, and there are a lot of vessels going around it. So we subjected the patient to EUS. We can see that this is a hypoechoic rounded mass. This is the superior mesenteric artery. This is the superior mesenteric vein. This is the CBD which is encased by the mass. We took EUS guided sample to confirm the diagnosis of malignancy in the same sedation, same sitting. We did an ERCP. We cannulated the ampulla of water, passed a guide wire, did a papillotomy, and placed a metal stent so that we can palliate his jaundice. So entire thing was done in 1 hour time. We established the tissue for diagnosis, and we did an ERCP to palliate his jaundice. After the bilirubin comes down, he can undergo palliative chemotherapy. Sixth case, alcoholic pancreatitis, 6 weeks duration. A CT was done, patient had pain abdomen, loss of appetite, weight loss, and some fever. CT showed in the image, you can see a large walled off pancreatic necrosis, which has got an air fluid level and multiple air foci within. So this is an infected pancreatic necrosis. The residual pancreatic body is seen below. Classically, all these patients were treated by surgeons. Initially, they used to do laparotomy and drainage. Now, many of the good qualified GI surgeons are able to do laparoscopic cystogastrostomy and drainage. We cannot drain it externally all the time because there is chances of developing a pancreatic fistula. So the options available are surgery, percutaneous drainage, or endoscopic drainage. So I have shown pictorially how a EUS works. So we put the EUS scope in the stomach, we identify the necrotic cavity, we puncture it, we pass a guide wire into the cavity, we dilate the tract. After dilating the tract with the CRE balloon, we are able to put metallic stent. This is a Nagi stent I will show in the video. So this is the video which is showing how the metallic stent is placed. And this stent is developed by Dr. Nageshwar Reddy, who is our Indian gastroenterologist. So I have punctured the cavity with the guide wire, I have dilated the tract, and this is the metal stent which I am placing from the stomach into the lesser sac. So I'll just show the stent deployment without wasting much time. So once the stent is placed, it is a funnel shaped stent with funnel on both the external and the internal aspect to prevent stent migration. Once the stent expands, you can see nicely the stent is deployed and all the purulent material is draining into the stomach. The lumen of the stent becomes 16 millimeter. It expands to 16 millimeter. Our normal gastroscopes are 11 millimeter in size. So all the solid debris which is there in the retroperitoneum, lesser sac, can be removed afterwards, after waiting for 24 to 48 hours. We can go with a normal diagnostic endoscope, use multiple accessories like a Dormia basket or a snare, and start removing the solid debris which is there. The pus will obviously drain, but all this solid debris will not drain. And for this, previously surgery was required to manually evacuate all these things. So this same thing we can do. We can pass the endoscope into the retroperitoneum through the stent, remove all the debris. It may require 2 to 3 sessions, but this doesn't require general anesthesia. Just a sedation is done and the patient can be followed as an outpatient. So we did multiple 2 to 3 sessions of endoscopic necrosectomy. In the next video, you will be able to see that after 2 to 3 sessions of such endoscopic necrosectomy,
Please try to conclude.
we have actually achieved complete drainage of the cavity. Now the cavity is clean. The stent will be left in situ for 4 to 6 weeks. After that, nature will heal and we will remove the stent and the patient will cure non-surgically. Last case of my today's presentation, 58-year-old gentleman had dysphagia for 2 years with hoarseness, halitosis, no weight loss and no comorbidities. This patient went to a civil hospital. A barium was done which shows a Zenker's diverticulum. Now Zenker's diverticulum classically happens in elderly patients. It is a diverticulum which happens just below the cricopharynx. It enlarges, there is food lodgement in it, and because of that the esophageal lumen is compressed and patient is not able to swallow. The hoarseness and halitosis happens because food material is retained over there. Classically, all these patients were operated by ENT surgeons, either percutaneously or with the help of rigid endoscopes. But the same thing we can do with our normal gastroscope. So this video will show how the Zenker's diverticulotomy is done. Is my videos seen? Is everybody is able to see the video?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the cricopharyngeal bar. This is the anteriorly. This is the esophageal lumen. So I'm putting a Rice tube over there to identify it, and I'm pushing some methylene blue so I can actually see the color of the Rice tube and the esophageal side of the lumen. On the right lower side is the diverticulum. So with the help of this IT knife, which is an insulated tip, the ivory white colored tip is not having electrocautery. I can cut this cricopharyngeal bar, which is the hypertrophied muscle, endoscopically. Now this surgery has been done just beyond the cricopharynx. So if anything happens, if the patient bleeds, there are high chances that the patient will aspirate. So we have to do it under general anesthesia. So gradually the dissection is done. It takes hardly 15 to 20 minutes. And this is the muscle fiber which I am cutting. After the muscle fibers are cut, the posterior wall of the diverticulum becomes continuous with the esophageal lumen. And the patient's dysphagia, I am just skipping the video due to lack of time, can be palliated without any open surgery. So once the diverticulotomy is done, the esophageal lumen opens better and the endoscope passes into the esophagus directly without any resistance. Now, this patient had significant weight loss. He was an elderly gentleman. He was financially also not that capable. We had done the surgery at practically no cost. And he was from Surendranagar. So I visited Surendranagar few days back when he came to see me in follow-up. He has gained around 10-12 kgs of weight and he is doing amazingly fine. He doesn't have any problem as of now. It is more than 3 or 4 years post this surgery. And this gives us a lot of satisfaction. To summarize, the reach of endoscopy is much beyond the traditional gastroscopy and colonoscopy. With the help of single balloon enteroscope, EUS, still other modalities are there like third space endoscopy or NOTS, which help us to do many interventions with minimum invasion, better safety, tolerability, and excellent outcome. The horizons of endoscopy are widening. Thank you.